while working on my recent and newest playlist of videos. I'm doing a series on plea bargains. Bill Thompson, Idaho 4, prosecuting attorney, the one that entered a plea agreement with Bryan Kohberger, and I realized while doing my research, I'm actually frustrated with myself. I'm actually very upset with myself. I let myself down. I built my channel to be real and true while bringing focus to the system, the justice system, and the way that it actually works within the true crime realm. When we discuss cases, one of the major factors that could potentially be an end result is plea bargains. And as I dig deeper and I think more and more about it and I get real and I go back to my personal experience, which I'm going to share with you in this video about plea bargains, I come to one very factor that I have to discuss. Did you know every plea bargain is forced? Plea bargains are obviously something that I should be able to discuss with ease through experience and knowledge that I've learned over the years of being a convict. Thank God now all it is exactly what the channel says. It's a convict's thoughts with ARHayes. That's me, ladies and gentlemen, that have not been here before. And to all of you who have been, welcome back. I want to first take a moment and thank so many of you out there that held me personally accountable for being true and staying on the path of what my channel is built on, and that's the integrity of truthful speaking when it comes to not only personal experience, but also my experiences through the justice system and the way I truly feel about that. Because of you guys bringing to my attention that I wasn't looking at everything clearly when it comes to the Bryan Kohberger case, which means I probably even started to look at other cases in an inappropriate way. I had to come back to reality, and it's you. It is you that helped start that directional move that was necessary. But what really nailed it all down was when I start into my research, my deep dive into Bill Thompson, the prosecuting attorney for Latah County for now over 40 years. And I wanted to deep dive into the very reasoning why everybody calls him the plea agreement monster. He is the beast of plea agreements. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? He does not take cases to trial. He will not take a capital death penalty case to trial. he sits and he waits and he taps his finger on the desk until a plea agreement comes available. And guess what? Here we are again. We're at the Bryan Kohberger, Idaho 4 case, quadruple homicide. And I swore up and down from the very beginning of this case, no plea agreement ever from either side. From either side. Not even the defense side. But the prosecutor side, I always said there was no chance. The victims' families were completely against it. All except for one family, which seemed to just stay distant and accept it. The others were upset, very upset about anything other than the death penalty being spoken of as the end result punishment for the committer of the crime. Now here, I'm deep diving and I've seen the twist within my own nature just because Bryan Kohberger stood before all and deemed himself as guilty. He accepted a plea bargain. And look, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated by that because I'm confused. I'm pissed off about it because I know the system. I know how this works. 95 to 98% of people who find themselves charged and housed within a jail system, meaning not even just their first experience of being jailed, but for all of those returning, 95 to 98% of those cases end up with a plea bargain. And I'm going to tell you many of the reasons why from a defendant's side of things here in a moment, which benefits the system. And it also benefits the prosecutors. And there's a lot of reasons to why that is as well. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But to clarify real quick, now that I've come back to my Jesus moment, I always hear people say that, so I better throw it in there. I came back to reality for my own self. And I realized something. Every single person that accepts a plea bargain has been forced to do so. And I know to many that doesn't make sense. And many will argue the fact, oh no, if they committed the crime, they got lucky, they got a plea bargain. Well, let me tell you, that's not always true. But first, I want to paint a picture before we dive into this discussion. And I'm going to utilize personal experience where I will talk about literally a situation where I was involved in not one plea bargain, not two plea bargains, but three at one time. That was a complete stacking of the pile on top of me that would never benefit me, and at the end of the day, royally screw me. And we're going to go over that, but I want to paint a picture first. First, think about something very simple. 95 to 98% of people that are charged and incarcerated, even those that aren't incarcerated but have been charged and held at the mercy of having to go to and from the courthouse, whether a paid attorney or even a private attorney, maybe even just one of the public pretenders, 95 to 98% accept a plea bargain. Think about that. For every 100 people that walk through a court system, 95 to 98 of those people end up signing a plea bargain, meaning they're convicted of that crime. 2 people out of 100 potentially don't end up convicted. Now think into the thousands, because where I came from in Maricopa County, thousands of people were arrested on a daily basis. So you can only imagine the churning of that paper when it came to plea agreements. Oh my God, I watched so many people. When you would be housed in a pod in the jail in Maricopa County, you would have between 100 to 300 people in your pod, and every single day I watched people accept plea bargains. Everybody talked, what am I facing in my charges? What am I facing as my end result? And everybody always said, you're going to get a plea bargain. We even had it down to the detail of which plea bargain offer you should accept. Never take the first. Think about the second. The third gets a little better, and the fourth will always be the worst. So make sure you know where you're at in your plea agreement offers so that you get the best deal available to you. Now, first timers always get that plea bargain offered to them, and they take it quick because they can't wait to get out of jail. See, that's one of the number one keys of why people accept plea agreements. And the prosecution and the district attorney's office knows this. People don't want to sit in jail. They want out as quick as they can. So if they slide that little agreement across that says, hey, by the way, if you go ahead and plead guilty to this and you get yourself this conviction on your record, we'll give you probation. Or we'll give you a lesser sentence than what you were expecting. Maybe you'll only have to do 30 days in jail instead of 180 days. We'll get you out of this place as quick as we can. Just sign here and take your guilt. Now, you see, that's called forcing because they're utilizing a very want of a person while dangling a carrot in front of them. And of course, the newer people don't think about the conviction. They think about the least amount of time they got to do. So they want to get out. But you see, it gets even heftier the bigger the charge, or how many times you've been convicted before. Habitual offenders. How many years are you facing? And they can come at you with the plea agreement that will offer you 1/3 of the amount of time, or half of what you're actually facing, deemed by the overstacking of charges. See, that's another way to control the whole plea agreement, is they overcharge you to begin with. Instead of only 2 counts, you may have 20. This leads to more years being presented in front of you that you're potentially going to have to do in the penitentiary. And remember, here's the key, and it's always thrown in your face. If you don't take this plea agreement that we're offering you and you take this to trial, you will get nothing less than the max sentence if you were convicted by a jury. Well, let me tell you, when those charges are stacked and those years are presented to you, it gets a little bit, it's hard to make that decision, because taking it to trial means you could face life. Where if you took that plea bargain, you might be out in 3 years. That's a hard decision. Even if you do feel like you're fully innocent and they can't prove it, you want to risk it based upon taking it to trial and hearing the words guilty delivered to you by a jury. You just never know. And let me tell you, with some of the attorneys that I've dealt with, some of those public pretenders that I've dealt with, I wouldn't risk it for anything in my life. So I'll be the first one to look directly at you. I've signed numerous plea bargains. Numerous across the board. I've signed plea bargains. There's only been a handful of times that I was willing to risk taking it to trial. And that's only because the max sentences that I was facing if I took it to trial were not much worse than what that plea agreement laying before me actually was offering. But you see, I fell into the trap before too. I was manipulated, and the way it always starts is at your arraignment. It's the very first time you step before the judge, and of course at that arraignment they read you what your charges are, and they make sure you 100% hear and understand how many years you're facing. It's hard when you have a wife sitting behind you, or a loved one, a mother or a father sitting behind you in the crowd, and they hear the stacked charges and just how many years you're facing. The tears start flowing, and you can hear the heavy breathing and sometimes even the crying happening behind you. And that's right when your public pretender slides that first offer of a plea bargain over to you, saying they're already offering a deal if you're willing to listen. I mean, are you serious? I got family behind me, loved ones behind me, crying, shaking, because that judge just said 100 years. He read every single charge, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, 10 years. And really, at the end of the day, you're going to do 10 years because all of them would run concurrent in most cases, unless they're just horrifically bad charges, which, when I look at a case like Bryan Kohberger's and some of these other cases in which Bill Thompson has pled out in the Latah County area, like the John Leaks, like the others that I'm looking into, the Silas Parks, yes, they got plea agreements that offer them the opportunity to not get the death penalty, and even some of them got the opportunity of parole. So, of course, that's far less than what they would have gotten if they took it to trial. So their benefit was actually there. But in most cases, if you look at somebody like Bryan Kohberger, what in the daylights do you think is the benefit there? The man is serving 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of ever going home. It's called forever and a day. And there's no benefit to it other than you're not housed on death row, so you'll get a few more privileges on a yard. You'll get to have an electronic device that you might not be able to have on death row. You'll be able to get some little bit extra commissary that you wouldn't be able to get on death row. But at the end of the day, it doesn't benefit you because you're going to die in the very same place, whether you're on death row or life without parole. But let's dive into a minute. Let me bring you into my experience, my life for a minute. Let's talk plea bargains. Let's talk about that threatening manner in which a prosecutor can hold it over your head and force you, whether you think you can beat it at trial or not, to take a plea agreement. Because trust me, at the end of the day, the prosecutor always holds the keys no matter what. They hold the keys on when you get to go home and when you got to sit in that cell and wait even longer. They hold the keys to the car. They hold the keys to that bus ride that you'll be taking to go to the penitentiary, and for how long it's going to be till you get that bus ride back. Me, when I was a young man and I had just finally got to Arizona, had been moving around a lot. I had already picked up felony charges in numerous other states, Washington State, Idaho, New Mexico, Boston, Massachusetts. I had been around the country and I had been acting stupid. I even picked up charges while I was on the run up in Alaska. Whew, man, I just couldn't stay out of trouble. And of course, when I got to Arizona, I just kept on that same path. But now I was an habitual offender, meaning they could up the stakes against me when it came to the charges and the amount of time each charge carried for me to have to go to the penitentiary and serve. I picked up a burglary charge that they trumped up to 2 burglary charges because they got me for breaking into the house and into the outside garage, all trumped up. Double burglaries, same crime. But then they added other things to it. So when I went to my first arraignment and I heard the amount of years for an habitual offender, it was 15, it was another 15, and then a 5-piece on top of that. So it sounded like I could potentially get 35 years if they stacked them, which as an habitual offender, they absolutely can do. And trust me, that prosecutor knew that I was being held by the cojones because I kind of knew I was guilty, and I think he did as well. So that plea bargain came across the table for 3 years of probation because I was a first-time offender in Arizona. They were willing to overlook the other states' convictions and give me a first-time plea, a first-time offender in Arizona. 3 years of probation, you get out today. Oh, hell yeah, I'm taking that with my knowledge and my history and my experience, I was just going to go on the run anyway. So what's the matter to me? I was never going to try to fulfill the probation. I just wanted out of jail. So I signed, and I took that very first plea deal Arizona offered me, convicting myself now in the state of Arizona, which at the time was Sheriff Joe Arpaio's neighborhood. But you see, it didn't end there, because I got out. And I tried to go meet for the very first time with my probation officer because I needed a little extra time to be able to get out of town. So I figured, let's start off on the right foot and go check in and make it seem as though I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. But the problem was, when I got to the probation office, they already had new charges against me. Same crime, different charges. So they had already convicted me of the burglary, which in the plea agreement, they dropped the second burglary charge for the garage, and they dropped another charge out of that plea agreement and only hit me with one burglary. The problem was, I took a weapon during the commission of the crime. So now, when I checked in with my probation officer, I had a new charge that I was being arrested for felony firearm possession by a known felon. It had not been said ever previously to this time, so new charges, and back to jail I went. Had to go right back in front of that same judge for an arraignment again. And in Arizona and Phoenix, they rotate those nightly. You go through immediately, within 24 hours, you're being arraigned. And that judge looked right at me, and I thought to myself, he's going to screw me over, because he just saw me accept a plea bargain on other felony charges for probation. Sure enough, at that arraignment, it's a minimum of a 5-year prison sentence for felony with a firearm. And sure enough, they had that plea agreement ready. They were going to give me another 3 years worth of probation because I hadn't violated the first one yet. They were willing to stack the probations on top of each other. Now I got 2 cases on probation, which we'll get to in a minute, on the screw job that this becomes, because it really turns into one. Leaving jail, and that's right, I didn't have a driver's license, ladies and gentlemen. So leaving jail, I didn't really have a lot of people at that time that could give me rides at any point in time of the day. Most people I knew worked. So I drove. And I got pulled over. No driver's license, no insurance, no registration. And here we go. Probation violation number 1. Back to jail. I just couldn't get out for more than a handful of days. I just kept on coming back. The good thing about it, this was a misdemeanor, so I wasn't going to have to go in front of that same judge, but I did have to go before a judge in regards to a probation violation on 2 various cases. 2 plea agreements violated. Not cool, man. Not cool, but the judge, he gave me the fine. He let me back out. He waived the probation violation because I literally had not had the opportunity to prove myself on probation as of yet. So off I went into the darkness. But remember, I already told you I wasn't going to try to abide by the probation. I was not going to try to complete it. So I went on the run. And when I did, I committed other crimes. I forged some documents and I forged some checks. And I got caught. I got arrested. And now, going before the very judge again under a new arraignment, thankfully a different judge. Thankfully, Phoenix has different judges for different things. So I was able to get a different judge, but now new felony charges, which they trumped up felony charges for each document and each check written. So I had a little over 15 counts of forgery. They even got me for stealing the pen from the bank. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I took the pen from the bank counter where I signed the checks to cash them. I took that pen and I got hit with theft. Misdemeanor theft of stealing the pen. But anyways, I violated my probations on 2 separate probations and new charges. So now, all that great mastery that I did to get out of jail in a quick and easy nature to start, all stacked up against me. Now I was an actual habitual offender in Arizona by itself. It didn't even matter the other states. So when they brought me my plea bargain, I had no choice. I was facing 25 to life for very basic felony charges because of my habitual offenses. They even brought up the dismissed counts because within my plea agreement, they didn't stay dismissed if I didn't complete the probation. They could be brought back against me, and they brought them back against me. I sat in jail, and this is when I was married to my wife. And I sat in jail and I discussed it with her, and she contacted private attorneys. She reached out to as many people as they could, and they all said I was doomed. They said the best plea bargain, if it got put in front of me, for 15 years was done deal. Sign that baby and get to moving. But guess what? It never fails. That prosecutor came to me because they were doing their best to save time, save money, and they offered me a plea agreement of 5.5 years. I took it, and off to prison I went. I didn't have a choice, because if I took it to trial or fought for whatever reason I possibly could, I would have got forever and a day myself in the penitentiary. So when I look at somebody now, is there reasons why innocent people can sign plea bargains? Oh, hell yes, there is. Look, there's a lot that goes into it. That discussion has to be had between a defense attorney and between the client, you as a defendant, to really come to the determination. What does the evidence against me look like? What type of story is going to be told within the courtroom at trial for that jury to weigh into their decision on my guilt? Do I have attorneys that are capable of combating that story with a narrative of our own to get them to see reasonable doubt? Because that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen, when you go to trial. And this is the very scenario Bryan Kohberger found himself in. If you go to trial, it is the tales, the stories that matter. Who makes the most sense? Who's got the most riveting story? Who captures the very attention of the jury for them to make their decision on your innocence or guilt? And in Bryan Kohberger's case, the entire narrative was stacked upon him. If you notice, there was books being written. There was documentaries coming out on mainstream TV. Hell, there was even movies in the making. I'm lucky. I never had that situation that played a part into my decision making. But on top of that, Bryan Kohberger was facing the death penalty. And that's why Bill Thompson, in the research that I've been doing, he's had one capital case conviction of a death penalty scenario. It got overturned. Every single case that I've looked into by Bill Thompson absolutely has been appealed, most of them for ineffective counsel. Because look, ladies and gentlemen, the way that these things play out, how could counsel do it appropriately even in a case for like Bryan Kohberger, there's so many scenarios that come back to foul play. There's no way the defense attorneys could work through each and every single lead and way of defending Bryan Kohberger. You have to excuse my language for a moment, but for one of the very first times in my videos, I have to say it. Plea agreements are literally the land of fuckery. Doesn't matter if you're innocent or guilty. You're doomed. And I'm going to tell you, 95 to 98% of people accepting plea agreements should be a very glaring light that shines brightly on the problem of our justice system. Speed to get these cases in and out of the courts is always in high demand for the prosecutor. The cost-saving measures of a plea agreement rather than having to do everything necessary for trial is another reasoning for that plea agreement. But the main key to it all is they have that carrot to dangle over your head. If you don't take this plea bargain, we are going to screw you to the max, and there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do about it. And I have this gut feeling within me. It's just a gut feeling now with everything that I'm digging through and everything I'm thinking. Bryan Kohberger had to literally sit down and visualize his mother sitting before him crying, just like the people I listen to sitting behind me in the courtroom, hearing the very years I was going to be incarcerated if I got the max. Bryan Kohberger's mama didn't want him to get the death penalty. I don't know the whole reasoning behind the defense approaching for the plea agreement, and I see the scenarios. Look, I'm not saying the man's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty. I don't know any more today than I did a year ago. I'm going through the docs. I'm doing my research. I'm doing the same thing as everybody else. And I haven't got to the conclusion that the evidence would have proven Bryan Kohberger guilty at trial. But you see, that's a downfall. That's a con when it is a defendant having to make the decision under pressure to accept or decline a plea agreement. And that's right. It's called forced to take a plea agreement. If you don't, you're going to die. Because the narrative is across the board against Bryan Kohberger, been demonstrated for all to see. And you don't think that would have been captivating enough for a jury? Hell, it's got 75% of this country believing that they had all the evidence in the world against him to prove his guilt. When Bill Thompson, the very prosecutor that entered the plea agreement, told every single one of us they didn't. They don't know why he did it. They don't know how he did it. They don't even have the evidence to prove he did it outside of a sheath with some DNA on it. And do you really believe that if this was a real and true justice system, that sheath would fly high and mighty as the proof to convict a man of a death penalty case? I don't think so. The plea agreement saved the state of Idaho. The plea agreement saved Bill Thompson. The plea agreement screwed Bryan Kohberger. I appreciate you for stopping by, taking a moment. This was a little bit of detour in my actual series that I'm working on. Bill Thompson's plea agreement history. We've got cases to talk about. I've got the proof of the screw jobs happening in Idaho. Thanks for stopping by. I'm ARHayes. This is Convict's Thoughts. Just another story about plea bargains. Have a good night.